Welcome to Deep in Love Talk Show with Ariel and Aaron. 1 hour of pure positivity highlighting those that are doing good in the world around us. Welcome, Richard Villasana. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, Ariel.
It's nice to have you here. Unfortunately, we can't see you, but that's okay.
No, but you have a great picture of me.
Sounds good. Well, welcome to Deep in Love Talk Show, 1 hour of pure positivity. I cannot wait to hear about the good that you are doing for us. Richard, can you introduce yourself? Let us get to know you a little about your background, hobbies, where you're from, the basic stuff.
Well, let's see. My background is that I'm living in San Diego, California. Love the weather. I'm originally from Texas, and I've been working in the field of with foster children for more than 20 years. In the course of that time, I spent a lot of time in Mexico. I was a professor down there. I've worked with companies like AT&T, Cisco Systems, companies around the world. And I'm married, and fortunately my wife, Christina, puts up with my late night habits. I have a tendency to stay up till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning working on projects, mostly for foster children. And yeah, when I do have a few moments, I do spend time hiking here in the California area, kayaking. It's just incredible weather. It's actually a very brisk 65 degrees. Ooh, it's cold out here. People are starting to break out the jackets.
I sure did last night. I pulled my jackets out in hoodies and sweatshirts. I'm in LA and it's chilly.
Well, see, that's always funny. Being from Texas, I mean, we get down to 20 below, and with the wind chill factor, it gets down to like 10 and 5 degrees. So here, when people start panicking and freezing at 65, I still have to laugh.
Nice. Well, Richard, I'm curious to know how you got started doing what you do with the foster care children.
Well, let me first start out by sharing a story, and this will really let people know what's going on in foster care. This has to do with one of the cases we worked. This was a girl named Veronica. She was 15 years old. She was living with her father till he got busted for dealing drugs. He got sent away to prison. And so she got put into the foster care system. And in the foster care system, when a child comes in there, they are obligated to start looking as soon as possible to find relatives, because the idea is to get a child out of foster care. So they looked, and unfortunately, in Veronica's case, all they could find was an uncle, but he passed away about 3 years ago. So Veronica's future was this: spend the next 3 years in foster care. At 18 years old, she's out on the street because she would have been too old for the system. And then at that point, her future would have been homelessness, turning to drugs or prostitution so she had money to eat, maybe getting raped, becoming pregnant, ending up in prison. And this all happens within a 2-year period. So by her 20th birthday, one or many of these things could have happened to her. Now, if we could find a relative, that could all change. And that's what happened, because the agent working her case came to my organization and said, look, we think she has relatives living in Mexico. Can you find them? We went down to Mexico. A few weeks later, we found her birth mother. Well, that's pretty fantastic, but it gets better. We found her grandmother. And then when the caseworker was talking to the mother, she explained that, Veronica has 2 aunts living in Pasadena. So guess where Veronica's going? Out of the foster care system to live with her 2 aunts. That's what we do.
That's right.
And that's why I got started in doing this more than 20 years ago, because I was able to find people. I did this professionally for companies, corporations, and then they started telling their friends, because I would find an uncle or a cousin, and then they started telling strangers, and we started getting phone calls from people. And they said, can you help me? And that's when I started the organization more than 20 years ago.
That's awesome. And what is the organization called again?
It's Find Families in Mexico. We specialize in locating relatives of foster children that are here in the U.S. So I want to make that really clear. We're talking about children that are in the U.S. Most of the time they are U.S. citizens. a parent was a U.S. citizen, their grandparents could have been U.S. citizens, but they have some kind of Hispanic ancestry.
Yeah.
And, those are the cases that these agencies bring to us because we're talking about searching for people internationally, and it's not easy.
Yeah. And you said you've been doing this for over 20 years?
Over 20 years.
Did we lose you? I think you're still there. I want to know what's so bad about the foster care system.
What's bad about the foster care system, or what's not working? Oh, so
What's
many
not working?
things.
Great question.
What's not working?
Obviously, there's something wrong that would drive you to start your organization.
Well, one, I got these calls from people, and you only have to read a couple of these emails from kids. Many of them were kids who were in foster care and got out, so they were 25, 30 years old, and I would get an email saying, my mother left me behind. My father, he disappeared. My mother had 3 kids, and she couldn't stay up here. She had family in Mexico. She took my brother, my sister, left me behind, and went back to Mexico. I haven't seen her in 10 years. You get other people saying, my father, my mother, they had me.
Right.
My mother has never seen me. I'd like her to know I exist, that I'm alive. Can you help me? I mean, it doesn't take many emails like that before you say, this is serious. This is important to these people. And if I can make a difference in their life, it will make a profound change for these people. They have a hole in their heart that I can fill because I have a special talent. And that's how I got started in doing this. And we did foster care cases. But specifically, a turning point for us was about 8 years ago. There's a gentleman here in the U.S. who is the leading expert. He is the person who, about the same time, 20 years ago, started in Washington State and created a program that he teaches to all the agencies around the country that when a child comes into foster care, they start looking for their relatives. And not everyone did this. Kids would come into the system and they kind of sat in the system. And he came up and said, look, we can do better. And so he created a process, and it's used widely in the U.S. And it's easy to do this in the U.S. You go to Google, go to a search engine, pay $10, and in 10 minutes, you can find 40, 60 relatives. No problem. And they can do this in 80% of the time. You can't do that for Mexico. You might be able to go to Google and find people 15% of the time, but you're not going to be able to find them like you do in the U.S. And that's where my specialty is. I had spent years in Mexico, and so he called me and said, I've been following your career. I'm the guy who goes to every county and every agency, and they're struggling, Richard. They don't know how to do this. And that means there are thousands of foster kids who have a relative who might take them in, and they're just sitting in foster care. They're alone, and they're going to be pushed down the street when they age out, and then all those bad things I told you about Veronica could happen to them. He said, nobody's helping them. He said, you can do it. And his name is Kevin Campbell, and I give him a lot of credit for helping us to focus and to put that front and center. And so I created, we already were doing the work, but I specifically created a division just for foster kids, and that's all we work on.
Gotcha. And how are you funded? How do you keep your business going?
That's a great question. We are donor supported. That means that caring adults out there and businesses are donating to us either on a ongoing basis or small gifts. Everything we do is free to the agencies. We don't charge them a penny. And we do that so that money is not a problem. So someone can't come back to us and say, we'd like to find these relatives. We know they're in Mexico. We know, you could probably find them. We don't have the money in the budget. We don't want anyone to use budget as a reason to keep a child in foster care.
Yeah.
So it's all donor supported. And a little later, I'd like to share about the crowdfunding we have coming up, because that's our annual project to raise funds for 2015.
Oh, okay. So that leads into our next question then. How can people be involved or help you?
Well, the way people can be involved is through the crowdfunding. Our website is www.findfamiliesinmexico.org, O-R-G, and there people can get information about the work we've done, the cases we've handled. They can see letters from agencies across the country that have written to us in appreciation for the work we've done. They'll also be able to go to our news section and get information on our upcoming crowdfunding. We're launching a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo on November 10th. And this is a little unique. Most crowdfunding campaigns, and for the people in the audience, what does that mean, crowdfunding? It means essentially the public contributes money, but they get a little gift instead of just simply giving money. That's what crowdfunding is all about. It's everyone helping a particular cause, and in this case, the cause is foster children. And we have some of the top marketing, internet specialists, PR people in the country who have very generously contributed their products and services and time that people can get. So let's say someone wants to find out how to get on a radio show like yours or get on to NBC. We have someone who specializes in publicity to help them with that. Somebody says, I want to know how I can really make money on the internet and not scam people. There's a gentleman who's been doing that for 25 years. So we have people who are New York Times best-selling authors, Steve Olsher. We have other people who are top in their field in sales and marketing. We've got something for everybody. And for nonprofits out there, we even have the gentleman who wrote the book on crowdfunding who is offering his book as a gift. That's Roberto Candelaria. I have to say, give a shout out to Roberto because he is helping us with our crowdfunding.
Nice. That's awesome. And so may I ask how big your staff is? Do you do all this work on your own, or do you have a team to help you? I imagine you're spending a lot of crazy hours.
Well, I do spend a lot of crazy hours. They say that when you're really passionate about something, you don't notice. And for any guys out there listening, what that means is when you work for a lot of hours and you forget about eating, that pretty much lets you know that you're into whatever you're doing. Because when you stop thinking about food, that's pretty intense. And I kind of lost my train of thought there on this one, so say something else.
Oh, you're just talking about the amount of hours you put in, and you have a team of supportive staff that helps you.
Oh, thank you. As far as the staff, it varies. We have staff both in the U.S. and Mexico. A lot of staff, obviously, in Mexico because we're dealing with government agencies. We're dealing with families. Some of the staff have been psychologists. We have advisors also who are, tops in their field. So I am a cultural expert. I'm also an international author and speaker. So put it together, the team is anywhere from half a dozen to a dozen people handling these cases and working with agencies not only in Mexico but in the U.S. Getting the documentation prepared, walking through the case with them, following up. We spend a lot of our time, unfortunately, having to follow up. That is one of the areas that we hope as things progress will move faster with the agencies. They're very willing to give us the cases, but sometimes overwhelmed and overworked, a case can sit for some time. So we hope that will improve over the years.
I'm sure. How do you, is there a quote or a motto that you live your life by?
Live my life by. Don't know, but I do know one of the, I guess, my points of philosophy is if you don't ask, you don't win. So I will ask anybody anything when it comes to foster children. This particular focus makes me very bold. I will ask people for things I would never ask otherwise. I might be too embarrassed or think it's not worth it. Helping a foster child and getting them out of foster care really motivates me to go up to anybody and ask because you have to. This is a group effort. This is not just me doing this, the team doing this. It's the donors, and I want to stress that. It's these people who are contributing to what we do that allow us to do this. It is everyone coming together, their comments, going to social media and writing comments about the foster kids, going to our social media sites like Facebook and Twitter and putting in their comments and sharing. You can't do this kind of work without people caring enough to help and to contribute. Just as you're asking me these questions, and this interview here is one of those steps to getting the word out.
Right.
Everybody.
A lot of times, unless an incident hits us personally, we're not really aware about it. We get so busy in our own lives. So I feel just the fact that you are raising awareness, speaking of it, blogging, writing it, your website, being on this talk show, is something that I didn't really think about before. So I feel like you're on the right path just with raising awareness of it. I know I recently just worked with the Covenant House in Hollywood. We threw a party for 120 homeless kids. I got to meet them and hear a few of their stories, but we don't think about the children who are given the boot from the foster care system. It's very hard for them to get on their feet. Where do they go to? If you don't have a job or a place lined up, literally you're back on the streets, and it's not a very welcoming or safe place. So I personally love what you do, and the more that I work with homeless children, or I worked with Children of the Night, I worked with them before, LA Works, and it's amazing what people are doing like yourself that are so selflessly helping these children.
Well, and you touched on a really critical area, and that's homelessness. 25% of the kids who come out of foster care, that means 1 out of 4, are going to be homeless in the next 2 years. They are either couch surfing at people they know, but they don't have a real place to call home. They don't have a safe place. And one of the people just who's a former foster child just wrote in asking for help because they've got 2 kids.
Oh.
They're living in the car, separately. They don't have a heater. It's getting cold, and they're really worried about them, that these kids are going to be, freezing and getting sick, or just being in a car, nowadays doesn't guarantee you're safe.
Right. Absolutely.
So there are foster kids who are sleeping on the steps at churches and alleyways. They don't have money. They don't have a place to stay. One of the other really sad things is that half of these kids will stop whatever their education is. So these are people who at 18 may have gone to 10th grade, 11th grade, and I need to say this. It's not that foster children are not any less smart than the rest of the people, but here's what the public doesn't know. Some of these kids move as much as 25 times when they're in foster care. Can you imagine moving 3 times during high school? But some of these kids will move 10, 15 times. They can't finish high school.
Right.
Because it's not like you spend 2 weeks in one school and they'll take your transcript and transfer it somewhere else. You don't have a transcript. So you go to school number 4 and they say, we don't have anything for you. You get to start 9th grade all over again.
Oh.
Exactly. I mean, 9th grade is bad enough the first time around. Just imagine.
Seriously.
Yeah. So imagine some poor kid who's in foster care who has to do it again for the 3rd, 4th time because they don't stay. And they have no control over this. It's the system. The system, they come home, and this is something else that we don't think about because it's not on the news.
Right.
These kids, when they're in school, they are afraid. And I'm
Oh.
not talking about being afraid of being bullied. They're afraid, Ariel, because every day they're thinking, is this the day I come home and my clothes are in a garbage bag on the porch
Oh.
and I'm being moved today? Because they don't get notice. They just
Well,
come home and the bag is outside and there's like, okay, in 20 minutes the social worker is coming by. You're leaving. You're going to another school, another part of town.
oh,
That's it.
that's no good. Ugh, my heart breaks for children like this. I want to be able to just take everybody in.
Well, let's talk about some of the good things, though, because what happens sometimes when you're talking about foster kids, and maybe right now people are thinking, this is so bad, but you know, there are good things happening. So let me talk about some of the good things, because there is hope. And I want people to know there is hope. There are things that are being done to fix this. And one of the best ways to help these kids is by finding their relatives. By far,
Yeah.
this is prevention. If we can find their relatives, then they can get placed with their relatives. And all the studies show that the children who are placed with their relatives, they do better in school, they're happier, they're healthier, they have less emotional problems, they do better mentally, they graduate at a much higher level if they're placed with relatives, they'll go to college at a higher rate, they'll know how to get a job and keep a job. So everything about having a good life for these children starts as soon as they can be placed with a relative. Now, that doesn't mean nothing ever goes wrong or that they don't get placed with
Right.
a bad uncle. Sure, nothing's perfect, but it is far and away the best solution. And if that
Yeah.
can't happen, sometimes opening the door for adoption. A lot of our work ends up allowing the courts and the social services to have the child up for adoption. And we've
Oh,
had some of the cases where they have been adopted. And again, they're here in the U.S. They don't go anywhere. They stay here in the U.S. with either their relatives or with a, adoptive family.
yeah. That's awesome. You're finding support and hope, and this is the next generation who needs it. And a lot of times children don't have a voice. So the fact that you have yourself and your team that are being a voice for the kids is amazing. Our show's about to wrap up here. Any last thoughts you want to leave us with?
Well, I do want to remind people about our upcoming crowdfunding. You can go to our website, www.findfamiliesinmexico.org, click on the news button, and it will give you all the updates on our crowdfunding that we're doing on Indiegogo, launching on November 10th. So we welcome any and everyone to come. Please share this on social media, on Facebook, Twitter. Let people know about this. It's easy to help these children. All it takes is a little effort, and you can change the lives of a foster child forever.
I love it. Well, Richard, thank you for being with us here today. To everyone listening in, it's been another awesome talk here with Deep in Love Talk Show. Richard, have a great week. Don't get too cold out there.
Oh, absolutely. You stay warm too.
Thank you.
All
Thanks for
right.
being with us.
You're so welcome.